Andrew's a forensic psychologist working for the probation service in South Central region, who will be talking about research and practice developments in working with people who are autistic and who are on probation. And Sharon Lynas leads the autism support service in Thames Valley Probation. They've particularly asked if we could please avoid having the chat function up whilst they're presenting because of that being distracting. So if people could just refrain from using the chat, that would be fantastic. Thank you. So over to you, Andrew and Sharon.
Thank you very much, Mary, and I hope you can hear me okay and see my slides. Is that the case?
Yep, we can see and hear. Thank you.
Excellent, very good news. And thank you, everyone, for inviting myself and Sharon to speak today. I'd like to talk to you about some work that I've been involved in the last 10 years or so, developing practice in my probation region. I work in the South Central Probation region, which includes Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire and Berkshire, what we call the Thames Valley. And in fact, I've worked in Thames Valley in the probation service for about 20 years now. We now include a wider area within our region, and that includes Hampshire as well. And there's some very interesting autism support practice going on in Hampshire as well, which is very encouraging. I just wanted to pay a little bit of a tribute. There's too many names for me to go through in detail here, but these are all the different individuals who I've worked with in the field of autism over the last 12 years. Or so, and they are from the health service, from social services, from an organisation called Autism Oxford, the Lorna Wing Centre, National Autistic Society, lots of people who have helped me in my own understanding about autism and allowed me to work with people on probation with autism, and also with the staff that I support in the South Central Probation region. I was also part of the British Psychologist Society when they created guidelines for working with people with autism a couple of years ago. I'd want to give a little trigger warning here, but because I'm a forensic psychologist working with probation, I will be making some reference to sexual offending behaviour, not in any detail. I'm not going to be describing any sexual offending in any detail, but I will be making reference to sexual offending. So I just want people to be aware of that. If that's something that people are uncomfortable with, they may not wish to attend this presentation, although I hope I'll be doing this in a constructive way in terms of addressing these issues. And also I'd like to say that really in discussing autism today, I'm talking about high functioning autism, cases where there is no learning disability or no IQ, but indeed below 80. That they're the cases that I'm talking about today. I just wanted to talk to you about one case that this is where my interest in autism kind of derives from. We call him Robert. Robert was convicted of indecent exposure after what the offence was, that he removed his trousers on a bus, and he was convicted of indecent exposure for this. Now, the probation officer, when they interviewed him for what's called the pre-sentence report, they thought that what Robert might have a learning disability. He had what they described as very low level of social functioning, found speaking very difficult, found eye contact very difficult, presented in a very withdrawn way. And they asked me as a psychologist to do an IQ test on him to see if he might perhaps qualify. The IQ might indicate a learning disability. But when I tested his IQ, it came out pretty high, certainly well over 100. Now, at that time, there was a Professor Bailey at Oxford University, left there many years ago, and I believe he went to work in New Zealand. But he was involved in this case, in Robert's case as well, and he was the person who said to me that he thought that Robert had autism. Interestingly, following Jason's talk that we've just had, he probably would have described it as autistic spectrum disorder, or if not, at the very least, autistic spectrum condition. But he introduced this, or indeed in those days, possibly called Asperger's syndrome, but a condition, he was describing Robert in terms of this, what we would now recognize as autism. Now, what we know about people with autism is that they can find certain textures or of items of clothing physically uncomfortable or distressing. That might be a part of their sort of high sensitivity to stimulation. And so this allowed us to see Robert's behaviour in a different context. So it became possible that rather than the normal motives behind indecent exposure are normally hostile, basically. They involve the offender seeking to distress others, normally women, by exposing themselves. But there was some suggestion in this case that there might be more to it because of Robert's autism, and it required us to think about his offending in a different way. Now, I have to say that it didn't mean that we could rule out completely any kind of malevolent or harmful intent in Robert's behaviour, but it did allow us to. It did require that we had to think about his behaviour in a more complex way, and the way that we worked with him on probation became different. We had input from other partner agencies to help us manage him and to help us work with him. And my understanding is that he didn't reoffend. So I just wanted to run that case past you because that's where it all sort of started for me about 12 years ago. Um, it's it it may well indeed be the case. It's important not to generalise, as Jason said in his talk about people with autism, but there's certainly a strong argument that says that because people with autism may, valuing and keep to rules and regulations, that they may be more law-abiding than the neurotypical population. However, what I have found is that there is if you like, a small group of people on probation that do have autism, and what happens then is that we need to spend more time. I guess we need to make reasonable adjustments to better understand their condition and how it might affect their behaviour, because this is what we're all about in probation. We deal with people who've been convicted of crimes in courts of law, and we manage those cases. We either have managed them on community orders where they're given an order to be a sentence to be served in the community, working with us in probation, and we also manage cases that are released from prison on so-called license. So most people who receive a prison sentence won't serve all of that sentence in prison, and they'll be released after a certain period of time to be managed in the community by us in probation. So in that regard, we work with everyone really. Most people who are in the criminal justice system will be under probation supervision at some time. So, regarding how our interaction with people with autism, some people who have a known autism diagnosis may commit an offence. Some people that we work with are known to adult social care services. For example, they've got an established diagnosis, and they may already be in receipt of a care package. We will work with those individuals and partner agencies in managing the person's risk and best addressing their risk of harm to the public as well as their own needs. So we're always taking we're in a kind of balancing act, I suppose, in probation, because we as I see it, our primary job, our primary client is the public and society, and our primary role is the protection of the public from people who might present a risk. But clearly, in order to engage with our people that we work with, we need to find ways to engage with them as constructively as possible. Some people, when they go to court following the commission of an offence, where they're at court, they may be tried at court or appearing for sentence, they can receive autism diagnoses them. Because interestingly, there are some people whose autism only comes to light when they've offended and been gone to a court, and then they may have received a psychological or psychiatric assessment which diagnoses autism, and they don't have a diagnosis before that time. Sometimes the solicitor, these kind of reports are normally brought about by the solicitor of the individual, who may interestingly see this as a way in which some kind of mitigating circumstance for their client, where they may seek a lesser sentence. We can debate the rights and wrongs of that process, but this is often how people come to light with autism when in their criminal justice journey. Of course, it is still the case normally that the individual is still responsible for their behaviour, and likely to be sentenced to a prison sentence or a probation community order, even if they do have an autism diagnosis. Although there are very few cases that I've dealt with where an individual has been deemed unfit to plead and sectioned under the Mental Health Act. Although I can only think of one case off the top of my head where the person was they was sectioned purely under a sort of high functioning autism diagnosis. Having said that, I'm mindful that there may be many other cases that I'm not aware of, because if you like, people who are sanctioned under the Mental Health Act tend not to come under my professional jurisdiction, because they are within the medium secure and high secure hospital settings. Just want to talk to you about a study that I did looking at the prevalence of autism in a community offender sample. This was published in Advances in Autism a little while ago now, 7 years ago. What we did was we used the AQ10. Don't know if people are familiar with that. This was a screening tool. It's just simply a 10-item screening tool that we ran with a large number of cases. This was all based within our Milton Keynes probation office, and thankfully, with the help of the senior probation officer there, who, funnily enough, is now my line manager. She did very well and was promoted, and she's now my line manager. But she was able to assist in screening a large number of people. This were people who were in prison and also on the community, who came into Milton Keynes probation office, 336 cases. And on the AQ10 screening, 4.5% screen positive. Now, this was interesting, just 15 cases. This was interesting, I thought, because I think if you apply many kinds of psychiatric or mental health in that broader sense screening tools to a probation population, you tend to find very high numbers. For example, not that I would equate autism with a condition like personality disorder. There's a big debate to be had there in itself, but so if you use something like a personality disorder screening, you're going to hit numbers of something like 70%. Whereas 4.5% really was quite low. And I think this is kind of important, really. But in other words, it illustrates that I don't believe people with autism are significantly overrepresented within the probation population. just to tell you a little bit more about the study, because having identified the 15 cases that screened positive. Now, remember, a screening tool is just that. If you screen for autism, you may identify people who would not receive a diagnosis, but then screen positive. Like, I guess you call that a false positive. 3 of those people, 3 of the 15, had an existing autism diagnosis. All of those people had been convicted of sexual offences, currently or previously. 7 of the cases, these were people serving relatively brief probation orders, and by the time we had the information about their screening, their orders had actually ended, so there was no further information on 7 cases. 5 cases had longer probation orders, and in these cases I administered a further assessment, what was then called the adult Asperger assessment. This was a questionnaire. People may be familiar with it, a 110 item questionnaire, which, if you like, you might call an advanced screening. It's certainly not a diagnostic tool, but if you like, it gives us more information about the likelihood of autism being present from the work of Simon Baron-Cohen. And of those 5 cases, three scored positive on the more advanced adult Asperger assessment. 2 didn't, and one in fact had received a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. So in a nutshell, we kind of ended up with 6 cases which I thought were diagnosably autistic in our client group out of 336, which I think is approximately 3%. Now, at that point in time, I realise things are a bit different now. The estimated population average of autism was 1%. Although, interestingly, and as someone mentioned earlier, among many women with autism are not diagnosed, and I think we're now understanding much more about that. And there's many more diagnoses for women where that's appropriate, which is very positive. But at this time, it was the case that amongst a male population, and the probation population is 90% male, I should say, we might expect a higher incidence to 1% of autism. You might expect it to be as high as 2%. So our 3% showed that really it was only 1% higher level of prevalence than you might otherwise expect, which I think is important, because I think it's very important not to stigmatize autism as that autistic people are more likely to commit offences. I'm putting that at just 1%. Having said that, in my probation region, we manage 13,000 people. So the 1% of 13,000 is still 130. If my maths is never my strong point, but I believe so. It's if you like, we might call it a sort of significant minority. I wanted to draw your attention to what I think are 4 very useful typologies put together by Howell in 2004. This is a way in which people with autism may be vulnerable to committing offences. The first one is where difficulty judging appropriate sexual behaviour and lack of understanding or misinterpretation of social or sexual cues may lead to illegal acts. So there are some people with autism who have committed sexual offences, and it would appear that this can derive from complications arising from their perception of other people's intent or about boundaries around social and sexual behaviour. I've found this to be particularly the case involving the internet. I don't see this so much in what I would call a contact sexual offence, where that actually involves a physical assault on another person, but I have seen it quite commonly in internet offending. Now, of course, unfortunately, one of the byproducts of the internet these days is it has facilitated sexually illegal and abusive behaviour. And it's possible that I've certainly known some people with autism who indulge in behaviours on the internet, which, where, for example, behaviour that they may have indulged in when they were a child, which wasn't deemed problematic, but when they behave in that indulge in that behaviour as an adult with people who still are children, that can lead to convictions. And then we need to think very carefully how we work with such individuals. I should say that there are significant developments across the prison and probation service in working with neurodiversity. We have some new treatment programs, which I'm not, I don't have time to speak about today, but they have been under development for addressing people with various neurodiverse conditions, and also I think we have a better understanding of the ways such individuals may present with, as I'm describing to you now. The second typology is where some people with autism can experience meltdowns, which can involve violent behaviour. Sometimes I have to say, significantly violent behaviour, where a person may, through what I have found is that an individual may be in a particularly stressful situation. So one man I worked with, his wife told him she was having an affair and was leaving him, and his response to that, and this was a person who was subsequently diagnosed with autism. At the time, he wasn't diagnosed. Um, his response to that situation was extremely aggressive, not so much in terms of assaulting his wife, but he had a meltdown which required 6 police officers to restrain him. Now, of course, what we what what we need to have, I guess, is if we have knowledge that a person has an autism diagnosis, then we would be mindful of this sort of possibility. This is particularly challenging in the case I just mentioned because they didn't have a diagnosis, and this relates to what I said earlier, that some people we deal with, they don't come to us diagnosed. Um, and then this begs a further sort of complicated question about whether or not prison and probation services have a responsibility to identify and diagnose autism in the people that they work with, even though they may not already have a diagnosis. So that's a kind of complicating factor, if you like, if you look at it philosophically. We have a definite responsibility to create reasonable adjustments for people we work with on probation, but the question is, do we have a requirement to identify autism where it's there, where it has not already been identified? I mean, in my view, I guess that we do as far as possible, although I think it's a question, there's not a sort of legal obligation in that regard. This is where it gets a bit complicated, and we haven't got time to go into all these details today, although it's a very interesting subject. A third area of offending sort of possibility is where someone's special interest may lead them into offending behaviour. So, for example, we might have had someone whose special interest was, for example, samurai swords or certain weapons. Now, therefore there's a concern there that those might be used in a threatening way, and then for people can be convicted for that behaviour. Or other examples of where a person might have a special interest in fire. Those people sometimes are convicted of arson offences, or also explosives. Unfortunately, we have a couple of quite high-profile cases where someone had a special interest in explosives and ended up receiving a lengthy prison sentence as a result of associated behaviour. So again, through better understanding of autism and how it impacts on those behaviours, we have a better way of working with such individuals. That's not to say, by the way, unfortunately, that we're always able to reduce the risk of such individuals. And sometimes they can be very sort of fixated in their special interest and also fixated in their response to the criminal justice system. So I've worked with one case of a man with autism who basically refused to engage with probation or the prison service because he was quite happy to be in prison. In fact, he was in a very high secure prison, with lots of restrictions, a place where many very dangerous people are based. But he found the sort of security and the stability of that location. Well, it would appear that he suited his needs because he would not engage with probation with any intent to move on from that situation. I do believe in the end there was a move on after many years of sort of negotiating with him to a lower category environment where I believe he still is. So that's how prisons work. Just for those who may not be aware of that, a less secure, more sort of therapeutic environment, which he was eventually moved to. I'm just mindful of my time because Sharon's going to be speaking in a minute. I wanted to talk about the final category of people with autism that might offend, and unfortunately, I think this is the most common category, and this is where people with autism may be vulnerable to exploitation by others and used in stooges. So some people with autism may be vulnerable to manipulation and by other by criminals who get involve them in their illegal practices. Unfortunately, we're seeing more of an example of that, especially with county lines offending. This is where drugs are run around the country, and vulnerable people, unfortunately children, as well as people who may be vulnerable through autism or learning disability, are used in this kind of context. Now, I'm a bit mindful of my time because it's now 11:45, and I do want Sharon to talk about the autism support service that we're running in Thames Valley Probation. So I wonder if I might do that, Sharon. Can I hopefully, once again, this is another seance atmosphere. I'm hoping you're there, Sharon, and able to. Here we go. Excellent. So Sharon, if I
I am
can,
here, yeah.
thank you. Please, just to introduce Sharon, in the last couple of years in probation, we've been in the position to commission services both in the north of our region, Thames Valley, and also in the south in Hampshire, for people to work with our people on probation who have autism. And Sharon's going to talk to us about the service that she runs in the Thames Valley area. Thank you very much, Sharon.
Thanks for the introduction. I'm just going to quickly share my screen so you can see my presentation. Just give that a couple of seconds just to load up. Okay. Andrew, can you just give me a thumbs up so you can see that okay?
Yeah, I can. That's perfect. Fine, Sharon. That's working.
Okay, lovely, thank you. So my name's Sharon Lynas. So I work for a company called 3SC. A little bit of background on 3SC. So we're a social enterprise. We've been going for around 15 years now. I know it says 13 on there. We're a not-for-profit company, so that means we don't have shareholders. Anything that we generate goes back into the business to enable us to help us to support more people. We've delivered a number of neurodiversity specific programs. This particular program, it's been commissioned, as Andrew says, by HMPPS, and it's to provide a service for people who have either a diagnosed or an undiagnosed autism. The contract itself is over 2 years, and we're just coming up to our second year now. The original inception of 3SC was to enable smaller providers to be able to access bigger contracts and essentially to level up the playing field for SMEs. And we continue to do that because we work with organisations who have lived experience of neurodiversity, and they're people who want to use their own personal experiences to help others. We now provide support primarily, but not exclusively, for people who are neurodivergent. including ex-offenders, job seekers and employers to help them better support themselves and the people around them. So there are two elements to our programme. So the first part is the direct delivery that we do with the people on probation. So we have a number of expert coaches and we provide coaching strategies to enable our people on probation to help manage their condition. So one of the most important things really is to help people to understand their condition, because we want people to know that the way they feel, the way they behave can be directly linked back to the condition. And it isn't because they're difficult or they're weird or they're challenging or they're a problem that needs fixing. It's just because they're different. And actually it's okay to be different, and it's really good to be different. And that's what we really want to help people to try and accept themselves. So they can access up to 8 hours worth of coaching. We help people to recognise their triggers, and then we help them put the strategies in place to be able to manage those difficult situations. It's quite a unique intervention, and for anybody that's had coaching, you will know that coaching is not where we tell people what to do, when to do it and how to do it. Actually, all the answers come from the people themselves. And so that can be really empowering for people, because we help people with decision making and problem solving, but we put the ownership back on our clients to actually, because they've come up with the solutions, it's now the responsibility of them to carry out those actions. And it works really well. We've had some great success stories so far. We also help for people to access support services. So it could be agencies that are already part of their rehabilitation plan, for example, recovery partners, or it could be external agencies that we've helped to identify to support them along their journey. Because actually, once they've completed their journey with us, it doesn't end there. It's not a magic wand, and it is going to be a long journey for them. So we want to make sure that if people do have a struggle a couple of months down the line, a couple of years, they know that they've got people that they can link in with. We also talk about the superpowers as well. So it is something that we talk about a lot, but we talk about embracing all the good stuff that the neurodiversity brings, because we know there are challenges and we don't take that away from anybody, because it is tough, but actually there are some really brilliant things as well that come along with the neurodiversity, and that's what we want to talk about. And we've talked a lot today about sort of taking away the negative stigmas and stereotypes, and that's absolutely what we want to do. We also work directly with the probation officers. So this is the second element to what we do. So we want to ensure that once we leave, that we're leaving a legacy. So we want them to have the knowledge and the skills to be able to understand how to better work with their neurodiverse clients. We need to make sure that what we're leaving behind is better informed practitioners and people that can really carry out our work, because although we might not be here in a couple of years, neurodiversity, as we know, certainly isn't going away. If anything, it's going to be talked about even more. So the more that we can do now to help everybody, the better it's going to be for our people. So what's available? So coaching can help to reduce the effect of years of negative self-talk and bullying behaviour, which many of our clients have encountered. Many of our clients have challenges with addiction. Neurodiversity coaching can help better understand this and the possible causes. For example, 2 of our people from our neurodiversity service programs have actually started back into employment last week. The coaching itself is tailored to complement skills required for rehabilitation service from the probation service by reinforcing learning in a neurodiverse, friendly and more appropriate way. Many clients claim that their conviction would have been less likely to happen if they had better emotional regulation. And what we're not suggesting is we're going to change the outcomes for every single person that comes on our pathway, but we certainly have recorded some significant changes with our people, and we've had some really positive feedback from the probation teams as well in terms of their own personal interactions. We find that lots of our clients really look forward to talking to a coach, because we don't talk about the conviction, we're talking about looking forward. And because 95% of our workforce are neurodiverse themselves, they're talking to people that genuinely understand them in a way that they can communicate with as well. So because of our personal and lived experience with autism and neurodiversity, we can help people to adapt their own communication style to a wider audience. The coaching itself, so we use a specific coaching model called OSCAR. Now, we chose this deliberately because the C in OSCAR stands for choices. So we thought that was particularly appropriate to this group of people, because when we're talking about choices and consequences, it's so relevant that people can understand why they've made the choices and actually the consequences of their actions. The OSCAR methodology is used to identify suitable goals and the actions that are needed to achieve them. The process itself is organic, so it might alter over the course of the sessions. So, for example, somebody might state at the start of their journey that they want to consider looking at work, but that might evolve actually how to look for work. Similarly, somebody who is looking at improving their social circles at the start of their journey, by the end of it, they might then be progressing to say hello to somebody at the shops or at work, or even as far as going to the theatre, actually engaging in different group workshops. We use a toolkit that's been developed between the coach and the client, and we work on a number of emotional well-being outcomes. They're better able to identify and respond to situations that might cause them stress or concern. Social interactions can also include developing a greater awareness of their boundaries and those of others, which is often connected to their events. And also knowing how to ask for help and being able to organise their support needs in a way that best can be presented to support services. So, for example, things like writing down their needs and their questions they would like to ask in advance. We also use a distance travel tool, and those initial distance travel scores are there. They can be quite a good indicator for the coach and the client on where their efforts could be best used at the start of the journey. We use it to improve the quality of the social interactions. They very often become a goal for our service users. And then the final distance travel scores are used as an opportunity for the client to see how far they've come in their time with the coach. And that can provide a really important reflective action for that person to celebrate their progress. So often speaking to someone who understands them and realising that others have had similar experiences can be a great start to improving confidence and self-esteem. And the partner of a person on probation noted that he started to wake up in the mornings now instead of the afternoons. And we do work quite closely with families and partners because it's really important that they understand the client journey as well. Because the more that they can get involved, the more networks that people have, the less likely they are to really go back to unhealthy behaviours and patterns. So many people on probation claim that their offence may have been partly due to becoming angry when they were confused or overwhelmed. So we look at developing strategies for increased thinking space and less impulsive responses, so they can help to stop inciting an incident likely to result in reoffending. A person on probation can feel trapped in a cycle that they can't see a way out of, so improved decision making can also help them to see the future as something brighter. In terms of eligibility, so the great thing about our service is that we don't require a diagnosis. So we can help those without a diagnosis, we can help clients to process the idea that they might be neurodiverse. So it goes back to that acceptance piece. In some cases, we might be the only form of neurodiverse specific support available. It is a unique intervention. It's certainly something that would be readily available outside of the probation service if you're not paying for it. So that's why we're really encouraging people to use this while it's available. We do opt for a non-judgmental approach. We treat everybody as individuals. And that's why we're not too concerned with the diagnosis. We certainly don't focus on the conviction because we look at the person and how it impacts on them rather than how you would, I guess, we don't have a checklist that would say if you meet all of this criteria, then therefore you're probably suitable for our programme. We're looking at individuals and how it impacts on them and their own personal challenges. Referring agencies are also very surprised at how quickly we pick people up. So in terms of eligibility, you only have to be 18 years or over. It's open to males and females. We get fewer referrals from females, and we do know the reasons why, but we do encourage referrals from more underrepresented groups. That includes racially minoritized people as well. You can access up to 8 hours worth of coaching with one of our expert coaches. And prior to actually making the referrals, we do request that the practitioners actually complete the AQ50 test, so we can get an understanding of where people are in terms of their needs. So the coaching team themselves, they remain a source of contact. It's all done on a one-to-one basis. We do most of our delivery within the probation offices. However, we can work at external premises. We can also offer a hybrid approach as well. So if people are more comfortable using Teams or the phone, then we can offer that as part of the service. It's all about what the customer wants. Everybody is given a dedicated coach who's really easy to access, and that person's there as a constant support throughout their journey with us. Some of the outcomes then, so we've noticed that we've seen improvements in overall confidence levels. They're often easily visible by observing the client from their first session to the last. We also take feedback from the practitioner as well, who, as I mentioned earlier, they generally feedback in terms of the more positive interactions. We also notice differences in the manner in which people walk into rooms, better eye contact, greater self-belief, better can-do attitudes, and really the ability to explain their needs more and how they feel to others. And then I've just put on here a case study from one of our very recent autistic clients that came on programme. So I won't read it out verbatim, but I'll just give you a minute or two just to go through this. So this particular gentleman, he was really struggling with social anxiety. So we provided him with strategies to really help when he's experiencing those struggles. He would then found that he'd really engaged with the service. He was then signposted to an autism support group that was local to his area as well. So we know that he's got that support should he need it. And his quote was that he was going to build back stronger in his life, which is really positive to hear. And that concludes the presentation. So I think that's bang on